Like for anybody else that was in a title fight or was in a main event or was in a big fight, if they get beat, it's going to push them back a little bit. If they get stopped, it's going to push them back a little bit. But when it's an injury, a freak injury, I mean, almost an act of God, it changes things, right? It makes it very easy for Conor to say and for the audience to accept, hey, I was just getting warmed up. I was just starting to go. I had no part of a strategy or a game plan for a 6.5-minute match. I was planning on a 25-minute match. Everything was going my way, and look what happened. Like, that's real. I just think of the Korean Zombie who just got beat. There is no scenario that anybody could lay out, including Team Korean Zombie, that would propel you back to a potential title fight or even a main event. Conor McGregor for sure will return to a main event and potentially a title fight. But it's different, isn't it? Do you guys remember the night Anderson Silva lost the belt? Anderson had beaten, it was a record. I want to say it was 12 guys in a row. I could be wrong and it was 13. Whatever it was the absolute record for title defenses. Loses to Chris Weidman. Anderson got knocked out. In the moment that Weidman landed the shot that knocked Anderson out, Anderson's hands were down and he was taunting Weidman. So, 7.5-minute fight. Weidman stops the streak, defeats and finishes the champion, takes the belt off of him. Anderson returns to a main event and to a world title fight against Chris Weidman. Who else could get stopped in a fight and have their next fight be a world championship match? Very different scenario, though, right? When you beat the Spider, of course, he gets the rematch. I mean, it's a little bit different. But I think that you understand the point. And the one thing that happened in that match is everybody focused on the time that Anderson dropped his hands and was being arrogant, was being cocky, is what a lot of people called it. Either way, that's where Weidman caught him. I'm going, wait a minute. The other 7.5 minutes all went Chris Weidman's way. Then when they get ready to rematch those two, Anderson Silva, who had just been finished and had the belt taken off him by a younger fighter, which is relevant historically speaking, Anderson was a 2.5-to-1 favorite. 2.5-to-1 favorite. And then there was the freak injury. Right? There was possibly the most gruesome injury that we'd ever seen within the sport. And it changed the way that we perceived the victory by Chris Weidman. Even though those two have now spent roughly 15 minutes together in the octagon and every moment went Weidman's way. Because of the way it was finished, and in the second bout, the gruesome injury, it changed the way we looked at that. And there is something to it. I could fast forward the tape from that fight to the BMF belt. It was 15 minutes, very clear, leaning Masvidal's way. Doctor stopped the fight due to a cut. Diaz, who we all know, does do his best work later in the fight, said, wait a minute, I was shorted. My strategy was not to win, not to put him away here. My strategy was to come on later, of which was going my way. I could feel him fading. I agree. I'm in. That works for me. Right? Like, there's a different way to lose. There's a different way of how these matches come to completion. I think I could grab George St. Pierre. I think you could grab George right out of the stands today. You could sell him to the audience, no problem, for a title fight at 2 different weight classes, since he was a champ at 70 and a champ at 85. You could main event him. You could get people invested. But I don't know that there's any other athlete that you could look at that has been removed from competition for years now that you could say that about. But there was a way that he finished. The same thing would carry over to Khabib. But I don't think there's other exceptions. I don't think there's other people that you could put in there. So it makes it very interesting as you look at Conor McGregor. So many people within the sport will use the expression, you're only as good as your last fight. I hear that all the time. I'm not sure that I believe that. I know the athlete does. The athlete will go through highs and lows, and however his last performance is what's going to affect his mood. I get that. But I'm not sure that the fans and the pundits and the promoters and everybody else involved needs to agree. There's something to be said for the body of work. Many people are on hotter streaks, by example, than Conor McGregor. Islam Makhachev's won how many fights in a row? I've lost track at so many. Is it 8 fights? If I'm wrong at 7, I think it's 8. Going to Benny, if he gets that one, I think it's going to be 9. That's pretty damn impressive. But Conor McGregor's a 3-time world champion. If everything had to stop right here and you could have one of those resumes, which would you rather have? Would you rather go through life being a guy that won his last 8 fights? Or would you rather be a guy who goes through life having been the interim champion, the featherweight champion, and the lightweight champion? It's interesting. The body of work matters if you're going to turn to resumes. If that's what you're going to do. It isn't necessarily what happened last. There is a story to be told, and there are different ways to get beat. In boxing, when a guy gets knocked out, a knockout is designed to be the most dominant thing that you can do in boxing. But if you knock a guy out, particularly if you do it early, he got caught. Simple as that. That's just what we say. We'll say he got caught. Wrestling, the world that I came from, a pin is designed and meant to be the most dominant thing that you could do to your opponent, but it's not. If you go out and pin a guy, particularly if you do it early, he got caught. So there's different ways to lose, and it is relevant the way that Conor went out. I mean, that freak accident is relevant. Conor's strategy going into a 25-minute match is not to get this whole thing done and be out of there safe and sound within 7 minutes. It's different. And I think that it does open some doors. I think it does change the way that that was perceived. And I think it would be very wise for Dustin Poirier, right? The Conor McGregor and the red panty night, this is still a thing. He is still the sport's biggest draw, for sure. Whatever he does next is going to be huge, whether that's a main event or it's a main event and a title fight. It's going to be huge. But there's going to be a Conor sweepstakes. Only one person gets to stand across from him. I think Poirier has a wonderful story to tell. I think Nate Diaz has a wonderful story to tell. I think some guys are going to need to start going after that. I still think Conor McGregor versus George Masvidal is fascinating. The whole reason that Conor McGregor even tested 170 pounds is directly because of George Masvidal. Like, there's some big matches, but there's a way to go after Conor. And if you do it too directly, you're not going to get him. He loves that. Boom, I got this guy, take him off the board, move on to the next one. It's very calculated, and the sweepstakes are about to begin. And I don't think that you were as good as your last fight. I don't agree with that. I think the body of work, like any resume, has to be taken in its totality. How do we view Conor? How do we view that loss? We were told we were going to get up to 25 minutes. We ended up with 7.5. Is that the match that we redo? Do we chalk it up to a freak incident? We go see the winner of Gaethje versus Oliveira? Maybe. I'm not here to answer any question. I'm just asking a question. And it does seem when you have a freak injury, historically speaking, we kind of wipe the whole thing. Almost as though it never happened. And I'm not sure that you could say that about other guys that were in Conor's spot, were in feature matches, title matches, main event matches. The way they were able to spin it, the way they were able to flip it, the way they were able to move forward. There's something significantly different when it's a freak injury. So where should Conor go from here, and how much should that impact him? That question's for you guys. I'm going to read the comments. I want to hear what you have to say.